Welcome to episode 55 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
So, lots to talk about today. Our guest today is Tim Walker, who has got 3 job titles. He's the Chief Executive of ARC21. He's currently the President of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. And I was trying to get that right, especially with George Niblock. And he is a visiting research fellow at Queen's University. So we had a good chat. We all felt a bit inferior, but we'll come to that maybe later, Jade.
Well, yes, so we are not worthy, wasn't it, Alistair, with all these jobs he was doing?
But he's actually
really a nice guy.
He's Dr. Tim Walker, but he doesn't use his official prefix.
No,
as we discovered later on in our chat. So
we did actually, and ARC21 being the Irish side of it, not quite Irish as in Northern Ireland, but here we're looking at the Irish government promises the investment into improving Ireland's sorting technology and its materials recovery facilities, its MER facilities. So it's quite, I don't quite know how much they're investing. The Let's Recycle thing doesn't actually say that. The link we'll put up. But it says it's a programme of investment and reform sets out a blueprint for the next government following the Irish election in November 2024.
There you go. So investment in infrastructure can only be good, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose any investment in infrastructure and improving the sorting technology is hopefully going to get more things out of the waste stream to get recycled.
And in Scotland, we have another consultation from SEPA on the Environmental Regulations Scotland guidance. And the consultation is in regard to the public participation and the fit and proper person test. So I'm hoping, I've not actually looked at it, Jane, I'm hoping it's a fairly short consultation, but responses need to be in by the 30th of March 2025. So
let's all get our pens and pencils out and start looking at it and replying. We've got this, we'll put all those links on, so it's fine.
And this is part of the ongoing environmental regulations consultations have been going on for a while now, and this is just the next step in all that. The environment, the waste exemptions expiring and changing, and the licenses changing to permits and so on. So that was all consulted on last year. So hopefully it'll make sense and be fairly non-topical, if you like. So we will have a look. If it is contentious, we'll report back.
I'm sure we will. So we've actually had the official scheme administrator for the extended producer responsibility for packaging identified, which officially launched on the 21st of January 2025. It's called PAC UK. So they're responsible for setting the fees and and making sure they can get all that money from the producers and making payments to local authority. So it's Dr. Margaret Bates, head of the UK Packaging EPR System Administrator, says the need for an effective EPR scheme that shifts the cost of managing household packaging waste to producers has never been more critical, which is a very good strapline, I think. Quite an important quote that. So hopefully we'll see what happens.
I think some of the councils have been told in principle how much money they're going to get, and
yes, I think that's it as well.
Quite chunky sums of money.
Yeah, I was looking at that, and there was quite some good sums of money. And I suppose it's like with anything, is it going to be ring fenced?
I think it's got to be ring fenced, because I think the councils have got to be able to go back and demonstrate they've met the obligations. So they're only going to get the money. So I think there's a lot of work for. Well, one that's, if you suddenly get handed, as a council, 3 or 4 million, it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually quite difficult to spend 3 or 4 million. It's what are you going to spend it and how are you going to demonstrate you're achieving what's needing to be achieved.
So do they have to spend it in a year, in 12 months?
Yeah, but
Or is that...
it's a rolling thing. It's every year they're getting that sum of money to manage that waste stream.
Oh, well.
But I think for that they need to demonstrate they're actually pulling out the packaging from the waste stream. And as we know, since lots of packaging is ending up in residual waste because we're that crap at recycling, there's a lot of work being done.
Because we did a waste composition study a while back at one of the recycling facilities in Scotland. And that was all around some of the cleaning products and how you could get cleaning products out of the waste if you put them in with plastic film and things like that, and how much actually gets taken out, which was quite interesting, because when we did it, the actual percentage of that type of cleaning product going through is absolutely minimal. So trying to identify it and spot it was a bit of a challenge.
What was the one I saw? I drew breath at one the other day. I saw some council down south was putting in place something ridiculous. It was like providing recycling for empty toothpaste tubes, and you were just thinking, really? There's plenty of low hanging. They're probably not segregating food, so there's 30% of your residual waste already that they could get out, and we're worrying about the 0.0005% that's actually made up of toothpaste tubes, and you think, we lost the plot in terms of thinking of the bigger numbers, but maybe not.
I suppose it's
This PAC UK and extended producer responsibility is going to be interesting in terms of how councils address it. And I'll be honest, I'm not totally sure a lot of councils have a waste management team in place that've got extra capacity to do lots of extra work.
I mean, it's talking about crisp packets, yogurt pots, bread bags, all that sort of stuff. And, you don't collect crisp packets and bread bags at the moment. So
I think there needs to be a whole debate about how we get plastic films out of the waste stream. Because I don't think, I think there's the sort of legislators are saying we need to get it out, and I understand why we need to get it out. But I think there's a whole level of practical, how do you physically get the public to put the film in such a way that the material recycler facilities can extract it and actually get some value out of it. And then there's a whole argument about who's actually even recycling the films in the UK. So there's nobody doing it. So we just try to pull out this material that there's not actually an infrastructure. Maybe we need to do what Ireland's doing and investing in facilities for it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's all going to be investment, isn't it? Because it's going to be taken out.
Some councils getting loads of funding and moan about why there's no facilities change.
Well, there we go.
Maybe there's people not thinking this through properly and actually thinking about what's needed.
Yeah, perhaps they just need this bit of money to, start taking out the crisp packets.
Yeah.
Have you not got one about shopping?
Yes.
Your favourite subject after shopping?
No, not my favourite. I will avoid shopping. So this is I can't remember. Norfolk. They have a reuse shop, and shoppers have spent over 600,000 in the county's recycling centres in terms of reuse, which is an amazing amount.
It's quite amazing, isn't it?
Incredible. I know I was drawn. Robert Robb, who was on North Ayrshire Council, who was on one of our episodes previously, he posted up about there's an ITV programme about keep it, chuck it or cash it in, the big clear out. So this is obviously an after Christmas TV programme, and his point was, do we really actually need a TV programme to tell people whether they should keep something or chuck it or try and retain the value of it? Have we really lost
the
semblance of reality?
People like these programmes, don't they? Especially like to see what everybody's got. Yeah, I mean, charity shops and everything, and I think it said something about they're spending a percentage of money going to charity, but a lot of it is going back into running their HWRCs, waste recycling centres. So yeah, you wonder whether that's taken out the benefit from the actual main charity shops. So,
Who knows?
Anyway, we were talking the other week about the man who was trying to get his bitcoins out of the tip, weren't we?
The landfill side chain.
Sorry.
Well, the news article's called that a tip.
Yeah, and the latest is the judge has thrown out his attempt to sue the council to recover from a rubbish tip a Bitcoin hard drive that is now worth 598 million, apparently.
But
So yeah,
he's now trying. Similarly, what he's now trying to do is he's trying to say that the bitcoins are secure in the landfill site, and he's trying to sell bits of them, which I don't quite understand his logic. But he's trying to say he's got 598 million in bitcoins secure in this landfill site that'll never be moved, and he's trying to get investors to buy into that share.
right, okay. Well, good luck on that one, eh?
So watch. We'll keep an eye on this story. We'll keep an eye on this one.
I think that's quite funny. Bless him. And have we got some travelling holiday stories?
Going international, so Thai island of Phuket has got this. They say they've got this major problem with waste management, and they're collecting more than 1,000 tons of waste every day, but their incinerator has only a 900-ton capacity, and they're obviously having problems with their landfill site in terms of doing it. But I'll guarantee if you did a waste analysis and that 20 or 30% would be food waste, take it out and compost it. Do a bit of basic segregation and get that level down. It always seems everybody thinks about recycling rather than thinking about how can we actually segregate waste into, say, an organic fraction and a non-organic fraction, and take that quantity down. And at least if you take the organic material out, your landfill's not going to smell anyway. I was going to say that island's famous, isn't it?
Well, yes. And I think it's famous with people of a certain age who've read that book, The Beach.
By Alex Garland.
And I think it's kind of one of those cult ones where you read the book and then you can watch the film, and it's all about people going on holiday and finding this amazing beach, and then I think they all get killed or something like that.
I do remember watching the film, and I remember them finding this amazing beach, but I can't actually remember what the film was about. I think you're right; they all died or something. I'm sure there are people. We've told Mia's not watched it before, so we've asked Mia to go and watch it. She's to dig it out and do the research.
I think I might have to search for it on Netflix or don't know, it'll be on iPlayer or something like that.
It was only published in 1996. It's not that long ago.
Well, it seems a lot longer than that, to be honest.
Well, that is 30 years, Jane.
Oh yeah, okay, well, fair enough. That is quite a long time ago. Yeah, and that's going on to something else, which is also, I don't know, it's a box set or a film or what, but this is one of the ones that one of the girls in the office said, you want to have a look at this? And it's called Landman. And I think it's been causing a bit of controversy because one of the episodes, which is called Hell Has a Front Yard, features a scene that has not gone down well with audiences and environmentalists. I don't know whether anybody's seen it, but I had a quick look on YouTube and it was quite interesting because there's an oil man and a lawyer, and they're walking around these windmills. It's actually an oil field, and they're walking around these windmills, and he says, "Oh yeah, that's great, good source of energy." And then he starts saying that how can it be renewable? The concrete used for buildings, the windmill for the concrete is used, oil for lubricating them, increasing their carbon footprint. And then he's talking about how much oil is used in everything. So I think it's caused a lot of controversy because he's basically saying that we can't move from fossil fuels to green energy until we can find an alternative source of energy before the fossil fuels run out. And the likelihood of that is pretty low. So yeah, so it's quite interesting. I think he's got a point.
No, I think there is an argument that we do need oil. We need a lot of oil for lots and lots of things. But I think the big one is, I don't particularly think we need oil to provide energy. I think between wind, solar, nuclear, things like that, we have got alternative ways of generating electricity without creating, greenhouse gases and whatever. I'd only glanced at the thing. I would need to read it more, but I think there's a few things like that you see quite often about, electric cars are a waste of time, and they've slanted the stats to say why it's a waste of time. And you could argue electric cars, for example, in terms of producing greenhouse gases are maybe not that good, but electric cars are absolutely great at reducing air pollution, which they don't produce any emissions when they're driving around the streets, whereas diesel cars and petrol cars do.
Yeah.
So you can extract certain bits of arguments and extrapolate them and make them work. But I know what I know. I think I maybe shared before. I've been trying to do the run around in the Donalds, which are the hills in the Scottish lowlands above 2,000 feet. Now, quite a lot of these hills are now wind farms. So I was out the weekend there, and you're in pristine country, middle of no place, in a cloud bubble, and then you get to near one of the tops, and all you hear is this noise, this sort of
whooshing
noise of the windmills. And they're actually, when you're up close to them, they're pretty noisy things, and they're pretty intrusive in terms of the tracks that go in, and that the whole area was in on Saturday was, normally that'd be wild country with footpaths and difficult access. Now there's tracks every place. Getting renewable energy in place, we are industrializing, wild country basically. So there is a real trade-off in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we've got in Eaglesham, it was at one point one of the biggest wind farms in Europe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just find it pretty amazing because it's, there's all that land now is accessible. It wasn't before. So you've got so many people going up there, walking their dogs, getting exercise, going, doing cycling and all that sort of stuff. So, so for two people who might have gone there in the middle of the wilds, you've now got lots of people enjoying that countryside and getting out and doing exercise. And you've also got like the actual science centre now has got a display thing up there telling you all about how the wind farm's created and all this. And as a village, I know this obviously shouldn't be part of it, but we do get quite a lot of planning gain from it as well.
You get some cash.
And I actually find that these windmills, you go up to them, they're massive, they are quite big and they're quite mesmerising.
No, I'd agree in that area, but also where do you stop? Yes, it's making hills more accessible, but it's taken away from the you wouldn't want Ben Nevis in Scotland to have a wind farm in it.
No.
So where do you draw the line between what's acceptable to put a wind farm on and what's not acceptable to put a wind farm on?
Well, I am sure the planners and all sorts of people have had these arguments a lot of times over.
One of the Donalds I was trying to reach the top of, I actually thought when I approached the top, I actually thought they'd put the damn turbine right in the top, but they actually hadn't. They just put it just off the top.
Yeah, would that not have made the hill so much taller then?
It probably would have, yeah. But I wouldn't have been able to get the top of the windmill. But then they very kindly put a stile over the big high fence they'd built. But that's the other thing. There's huge areas getting planted up with trees, and they put up these massive 2.5 metre fences, but they don't put any access for pedestrians.
Yeah.
So I ended up climbing about 8 2.5 metre fences at the weekend to get over. Which is all right for me, but it's not okay if you're an 80-year-old guy trying to go up a hill, but there's maybe not many 80-year-old guys trying to go up a hill.
No, I don't think so.
Or somebody with a dog, for example, they can't go over the thing. So
yeah,
I think there's issues out there. Anyway, how do we go on to wind turbines?
I was going to say, talking about old people, no, that's not right. Talking about birthdays, we've had an Albion birthday, haven't we? And we had a big party. Les was 70. He was actually 70 on New Year's Eve, I think. And we had he had a surprise birthday party. So we had and he's still running around doing all the monitoring and stuff for us. And it's not, it's not that we're not letting him retire. It's not anything like that.
We have tried to let him retire,
but he's like, no.
He's not wanting to retire.
No. And it was a good party on Saturday night. It was a surprise party, and his family invited us workers as well. So it was really nice, actually.
Sadly, I missed it, but never mind. And I've got a new theory about my holly wreaths and public benches. Have you heard this? I don't think you've heard this one yet, Jane.
Holly wreaths. So is this as well as the flowers?
We're now almost at the end of January, and you walk along your seafront, and all these benches have got now tatty old holly wreaths and flowers sitting withering away, stopping people using the benches. So I'm going to start a campaign. My new campaign is, if you've donated a bench for a loved one, instead of going out and wasting your money buying a holly wreath or a bunch of flowers, you walk down to your bench, you sit on your bench, you think about your loved one, and then you get your phone out and you make a donation to charity of your choice.
Okay.
And then you say hello to the people walking by the bench, and you leave the bench as a bench without a holly wreath on it.
So what you would have spent on a holly wreath or a bunch of flowers, you spend it. Yeah, well, yeah, that makes sense.
All about stopping endless consumerism for the sake of consumerism.
Yeah.
Is that good? Do you think that could fly as a campaign?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Right.
Don't know how we're going to run with that.
Well, yeah.
Because see what listeners think of I'm being miserable about park benches. And I still don't think I am. I still think if you donate a bench to the public, it's for the public. It's not to be your memorial shrine.
Well, yeah. No, I would probably agree with that. But anyway, we've got some rubbish talk in terms of our listeners here, which is a bit...
You're not doing well, Jane.
Which is slightly disappointing, to be fair, because male, you're running away with it. As females need to get our act together. Men, according to this, right, and I'm sure it's right, no fiddling about with the statistics, but there's 78.6 male listeners and only 17.5% female listeners. So come on, girls, we need to get our whatchamacallits on, or headphones on, and start listening.
Is that because we've not had enough? We've been a bit lacking in female guests recently.
I don't know. And also, we've got quite a lot of female youngsters. So it's 50-50 on the youngsters. It's 50-50
for 23 to 27, isn't it?
Yeah. And then as we get up to
the old foggies, the 45s, the 59s were 95 to 5%.
5% girlies. Come on, girlies. We need to get our act together. So anyway, that's my campaign.
But we've got a whole 3.4% of our listenership is in America.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe they're looking for some salvation from Trump being in charge.
Well, yes, I think that land man, the oil man, and Trump would have a lot to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, usual, get in touch. hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.
So if you get any ideas about my holly wreath idea or for getting the female listenership up, then drop us a wee note.
Yeah, and also anything you can think of in terms of wind turbines, or you want to make any comments on that, or anything really. You know, if you're heading off to Phuket on holiday and you want to investigate the waste issues and send us something back, that'd be even better.
Or they could go and change. We could get somebody to go and check out the landfill site while they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Take some photos.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorted.
So as always, like, comment, share. We'll love to see the comments. We're trying. Sometimes we miss them, so don't feel offended if we don't reply to you. But we try and keep on top of if people have liked and commented and shared. So please, you know, if you do listen to us, please try and share it around your network as much as possible.
And if you've got a female friend or whatever, then definitely share it with them.
Absolutely. And lastly, I'm doing a bit of podultry this week, Jane.
Okay, you're going to have to explain. What's podultry again? That sounds rude.
Going on another podcast.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
I don't know if that's an official order. So I am going on the founder's chair.
Right, okay, so what's that all about?
About they're trying to interview founders of businesses. Because the logic is everybody thinks it's easy to start a business, and they want to share people's journeys about how they started businesses and just share that knowledge. So
all right, okay,
I have a list of questions to think about, and I will be...
Really?
So I don't honestly know when it's going to go out, but we will work out when it's going out and where it's going out, and I'm sure we'll manage to share it as usual.
Okay.
There
No
you go.
problem. We'll look
So I
forward
think
to
that's
that
us. I think that's us, and it's over to, we said at the start, Tim Walker, Chief Executive of ARC21, plus a few other things. A really interesting chat with Tim, myself, and Jane Bond.
Hi, Tim, and welcome to Rubbish Talk. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm looking out of the window at what is looking to be about -2 here in Belfast. So it's probably a lot warmer than it is where you are. And it's a lovely bright day with only a couple of clouds in the sky.
I tell you what, it's a bit like that here. Although when I was driving down to Ayr, it was -7, and it was like I was talking to one of the guys here who's got an electric car, and I said, "How's your electric car?" He said, "It's brilliant. Heats up straight away." And I'm like, "Well, I got to Kilmarnock and I'm still freezing."
So the electric cars, you can just sit in your house and get them to start the heating before you even get into it.
I know. And I think I'm really doing well because I've got electric windscreens. Next car I think is going to have a heated seats. So anyway, sorry Tim, that was a bit of a down a rabbit hole on weather. We always like to talk about weather, don't we? So we have a number of questions for you, and it's lovely to have you on Rubbish Talk. So the first one is, who do you currently work for? And a bit of background about the organisation that you work for.
Sure. Okay, well, I'm the Chief Executive of ARC21. And ARC21 is a local government contracting authority. So on behalf of 6 councils in Northern Ireland, I basically buy environmental services and products for them. Me and my small team. We don't have a very big team doing that, but we cover effectively about 60% of Northern Ireland. And by default, we kind of manage 60% of the waste. Not totality, not in total, but a pretty large portion of that, because most of the waste those councils generate come through various contracts that we've put in place over the years.
Yeah, do you know what? When I looked at that and I thought, ARC21, that brings back memories. I used to work for Baptiste and Jacobs, and we worked on ARC21 in the late 19... Well, it must be 1998, 99, 2000, when it was all first starting, and we were looking at energy from waste. And I remember having public consultations all around, your ARC21 area. So yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, that's a long time ago now, so you could probably tell me how it's improved and what actually got built in the end.
Well, it's still in the design process. We have been recommended for approval 4 times, but it's never actually been approved or determined in favour of the development. So it's still in the stocks. And in fact, we're about to go through that rodeo again and potentially submit a final dossier to the planners early in the new year, this year, with a view to maybe getting a positive decision. I don't know, just after Easter, just before Easter, before summer, sometime down the road.
And what's that for, Tim? What type of facility?
That's for effectively a multi-facility at one site. So we're looking for an MBT plant and energy from waste plant in the Belfast Hills, co-located for ease of convenience to the city and ease of convenience for minimizing the movement of materials once they are brought to the facility. So, I mean, ARC21 itself, Jane, as you just said, it's been around for, we had our 21st birthday a couple of years back. And at this stage, we've managed well over £500 million on behalf of the councils. So, although we're kind of low key, we're not a newbie by any means.
Yeah, it has been a while. I hadn't realised 21 years.
And you do have another role at the moment, Tim, don't you?
Yes. Yes, Alistair. It's a good point. You should highlight that. I've actually got 3 other roles. So starting kind of in reverse order of input at the minute. So I'm a researcher in Queen's University on the circular economy. And I'm just looking at how the circular economy is sort of panning out for Ireland, north and south. At the minute, that mainly means reading up on how developments are going and the kind of interest and development that's happening in various parts of the country. I'm also on the advisory committee on packaging for DEFRA. Now, that, in theory, stood down in December, but we've yet to hear whether there'll be an extension or not. It may well come to pass because the new Circular Economy Task Force for England has been established that we get stood down. And then lastly, and I think this is probably the question you're asking me about, it just so happens that this year I'm the president of the Chartered Institution of Wastes Management. A wonderful, easy phrase to roll off the tongue there.
That's the one I was after. I was fully not aware of the first two you mentioned. So well done for all of these.
So what's that involving?
It does mean it's quite engaging, so there's quite a bit of time put in just for now, but it's on that basis that it is just a period of time. So lean into it and give the most I can, especially to that last one, the presidency, because it lasts just for a year. So what can I do? How can I best demonstrate, exemplify, and project the institution more widely and more positively to a wider audience?
So when does your year end officially?
It ends in 5 months and 21 days.
Not that you're counting down at all.
So
have you
enjoyed it, Tim? What's your challenges been in that kind of role?
It's probably not exactly that figure, but it's certainly at the end of June. The date has been set. I can't recall it exactly now, but it's been great fun. It's been quite a lot of travel, and from a local government background, that's not something we're terribly used to, because local government is a bit like it says on the tin. It's local government, so jumping in a plane once a week to go somewhere is a bit of a novelty. It's great. It's great mixing and mingling with all the different facets of the sector. I've had some great conversations around things like the latest bin lift technology, through to some of the latest developments on packaging. We may come back to that. Through to meeting ministers and talking about the bigger picture and the agenda around how to enact and effect legislation. And there's also been some interesting sidebars into some of the worshipful orders in London who are taking a real interest around the whole recycling area. Because they are obviously these chartered bodies have been around for a long time, and like everything else, they're evolving with the passing of time, and they want to remain current.
That's interesting.
There you go. So taking you back a bit of a step in time, what brought you into the world of waste management, and did you plan it?
I have done a few degrees in my time, and certainly waste was not a big agenda item on any of the university courses I did. So I guess I kind of ended up in waste a bit by default. And it was along the lines of I went to where the work was. And at the time in Dublin, there was not a lot of work. Growing up in the late 80s in Dublin, it was pretty bleak. And most of us were heading for the boats in one form or other. And I happened to get a job in Tala, which is in West Dublin, and it was to do with the management and control of wastes to be sent overseas for disposal. I mean, Ireland has got a huge pharmachem industry. I think at one stage it was second largest in Europe outside of Switzerland, which is one of those kind of facts that not many people know, and why would you? But as a result of that, there's quite a lot of wastes generated from the pharmachem business and industries, and there weren't very many facilities in Ireland. So a lot of the materials, the hazardous waste materials and the discarded materials had to be sent overseas to England, to France, to Scandinavia for disposal. And I got involved in that way, both through the paperwork side, through the consultancy side, and ultimately through the actual hands-on physicality of it. And several years after that, one of the big English companies moved into Ireland, and they expressed an interest, and somebody who knew about waste and knew the local landscape. And it just so happened that ball landed at my foot. And that was about good old-fashioned municipal solid waste. So we're talking about, I've been involved effectively in waste management since the late 80s, early 90s. And it has struck me repeatedly over the years that none of what I have learned was actually taught in college. So as a result, I frequently end up speaking in colleges and to students about the opportunities in waste, the opportunities in resources, the opportunities emerging in the circular economy, because it's a huge area. It's a very essential area of society. It's one of the most essential aspects of the value chain in terms of what happens to all these materials. And with the growth and the importance and the emphasis now being placed on circularity, I feel we're moving from being just a sector to also becoming a discipline. So when speaking to university students, it's like, we're not just managing sites like landfill sites or transfer stations or other disposal plants. We're also now getting into things like talking about lean manufacture or Six Sigma or Kaizen Blitz or statistical process control. So where do you want to fit on this continuum? As well as all the legality, as well as all the marketing, as well as all the promotions, as well as the community outreach and the behavioral economics. That's a huge area. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and I think waste touches everything, doesn't it? It's like we do a lot of work with the NHS, and realistically, you would like waste to be included in the training for doctors, the training for nurses, the training for anybody, so that you can get in there and say, right, okay, well, this is how you should manage your clinical waste, and this is why you should manage it in this way. But it's not seen as very important, which is a bit of a shame.
It may not be a priority when they're in a packed ward or in a surgery, but ultimately, everything we have, everything we own, everything we purchase will be a waste at some stage in the current climate. How do we change that? Because we can't keep on going at the current rate of consumption.
Oh, dear me. Yes.
Absolutely. So in that journey to your role now at ARC21, any favourite projects, jobs, roles that you've had that you look back quite fondly and think that was the best time when this is all I had to worry about?
Well, I do remember, I spent a lot of time working in Belfast City Council as their head of waste management. So I spent over 2 decades in that role. But one that keeps on coming to mind was a very practical one and a very hands-on one before I joined Belfast. And it was when I was doing an asbestos strip job down in Wexford on behalf of ESP. And having spent the entire day wearing
ESP's the
electricity supply boards. They had a number of plants throughout Ireland generating electricity, built in from the 40s onwards. So they were riddled with asbestos. So teams of haz waste guys were brought in to strip the asbestos out, to bag it up, and to send it off for disposal. And so it was one of those weekend jobs that I said, sure, I'll do it. And I remember wearing a haz waste suit. Completely wrapped up in it. I couldn't wear my glasses because I have to wear goggles and things. And spending about 8 hours shifting, I don't know how many bags of material into larger 1 or 2 meter bags, and then putting them into the closed container for shipping. And I remember finding that really rewarding. And then going back to the hotel, and I remember falling asleep in the bath. Can't remember having too many baths in my time, but that was one time I remember having a bath and falling asleep in the bath. But there's been some really good experiences, and some of the door knocking exercises we did in Belfast as part of the rollout of new bin collection services, and some of the receptions we got from people, and learning there were different messages depending on which audience you were pitching to. And once you got that message, it could really resonate well with the different communities, the different householders, and explaining why it was important. But a bit like you said a minute ago, Jane, one of the biggest challenges before us now is how we stop just saying recycling is the end game, and we start saying, actually, you know what, there's a bigger fish to fry, and ultimately we have to start talking about consumption and just how much stuff we consume, and that's a much more tricky thing. So how do we develop better stories to convey these messages that don't spook people, that don't scare people. Because ultimately, for us to keep doing our current lifestyle, we have to change everything. So everything must change for everything to stay the same. But we don't want to spook people because it's far too easy just to come up with some horror story and have people bolt for the hills. And that's not what we want to do, because that just causes people to hunker down and reject the messaging we're trying to get across.
Yeah, it's always like, well, I put my waste in the bin and it's somebody else's problem. It's the council. It's the council's waste. It's not my waste. And it's trying to get around that mindset, isn't it? To say, well, let's have a look. Did you need that in the first place, or can you amend it? Can you refurbish it? Can you fix it? Is it gonna? Yeah. So.
Well, it was straight into rather murky waters, and it is literally the first week after the Christmas break, and Christmas time, of course, for all of us professional wasters, is a time that we come to relish because there's so much stuff that's presented for us, so many items gifted to us to manage.
Yeah, it's always that challenge, and you see, Tim, we do so much waste composition analysis work, and you see some of the stuff that people throw away, and you think, there must be another home for this. There must be something you could have done with this rather than just throw it away or give it to a charity shop or whatever. And it's quite sad sometimes in that respect. So in terms about, you've done your best job. What about any worst jobs or any disasters or any funny stories about this? There must be quite a few around in Belfast around there, you'd like to think.
I'll start off with my most harrowing story, which is maybe not the best place to start, but I'll get it out of the way early. When I ran Ireland's largest waste facility, which at the time was a landfill site, just before we closed it, literally a matter of months before we closed it, we had a death on the landfill site, totally unexpected, totally out of order, and completely avoidable, and that has left a long-lasting shadow about the importance of making sure there is clarity of messaging, that communications are strong, that people understand what they're doing going into situations, and you don't just rely on a paper chain or on a system in itself. People have to live it and own it. And certainly when I've taken students and others and counsellors on site visits and stuff, it's saying, be aware, there are site guidelines and site rules, and you must stick to them. Do not deviate. Don't wander off piece. There's a reason why there's yellow hatching on the walkways for you to abide by. That's for safety purposes. And I think it's very easy to forget that. And certainly when you're not in the industry, it's very easy to assume that there's nothing here to see. And look, everybody's familiar with a bin lorry. What harm can it do me? So that to me was really a really salutary lesson, that just because things are written down, just because you do briefing sessions, doesn't mean that the wider team or users of sites actually internalize that. And you have to expect the unexpected. On a more humorous note, I do remember one of my site staff going out, one of my managers going out to talk to a group of ladies about changes to the bin collection service, and they weren't really big into this environmental agenda. And effectively, he locked him in the garage for several hours. Where on earth is he gone? He shouldn't have disappeared like this. So, yeah, we had to sort of circle the wagons to find out where he was, and he was released after a while. So there are many stories. You can't work in waste without coming across stories. One of my favorite ones was speaking to a load of the bin collection crews and saying, you guys are all fairies, and they kind of balking at me and going, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, it's early in the morning. You guys drive out of the depots, you go around the streets, and when you come back in, what was left out in the streets is gone. Like magic. You've made it happen. It's just disappeared. So you're like little fairies. You go out there and stuff happens. And he's sitting going, oh, we haven't been called this before.
Yeah. Should we thump this guy or not?
I use that quite a lot, Tim, when I do courses. I talk about the magic bin fairy that comes along the back lane and empties the bins.
That's right.
The stuff vanishes.
But this is this issue of storytelling. how to make things resonate with people, how to make them appreciate, understand, and bring it into their life. Because it's far too easy, as you said, Jane, a minute ago, people just present their materials, their waste at their back door, their front door, and it disappears. And very quickly they lose sight or cognition of just how much they presented. We've given everybody now 2 40-litre bins, and some people seem to view it as a challenge to fill it every 2 weeks, if you're on a 2-weekly cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So how do you think your opinions, habits out with the workplace have changed as you've gone through your career, and how do we get better at engaging with the public? I went through Christmas period there, sort of almost having to bite my tongue a few times as to what was going on about waste and so on, and I get the feeling there's a lot of that misunderstanding out there, and as you talked about already about consumerism and it's not just the recycling, but there's lots to it. How do you get that across? And are you the bin police, basically?
It's a really good question, and it's a really tricky one. An admission which I've never made before is that when I was in college, I lived in a house with a load of other guys in Port Stewart on the north coast of Northern Ireland. And we used to put out our bin every week because I had weekly collections at that stage, and everything went into it. Textiles, cans, bottles, everything. Because even though I was studying environmental science, in fact, even though most of us in the house were studying some version of environmental or ecological sciences, there was a disconnect between what we were doing and what we were learning. And as I mentioned earlier on in this discussion, the issue of waste wasn't really taught in college when I was there back in the 80s. So there was a fracture between thought and deed. And it was fine learning all about water pollution, air pollution and stuff, but we didn't connect to, but this is what we're doing in our daily lives. So as I mentioned, I have done a few courses in my life. And so I very much applied that issue of experiential learning, doing the job, with book learning. And then I've tried to write it up and tried to publish, tried to broadcast, tried to showcase the various things I've learned along the way. And as I've learned stuff and as I've read stuff, I've then applied what I've read to my work, and I've applied what I've worked to what I'm reading. And so, yeah, my job has absolutely influenced my appreciation and understanding. Ultimately, I would say more widely, I'm an environmentalist, and waste is kind of the outworking of that. But it's very tangible. I mean, that's the thing I use this term loosely, but I love about waste. You can see it. You can see it every day, every week, every month. You can go into the NHS, Jane, as you were saying. You can see the waste. You can go out in the street and you can see the bins presented. You can see the litter on the street. You can go into the fanciest of modern high-tech businesses or organizations, public sector, private sector, not-for-profit. You can see it. And again, one of my roles has been in various guises as an auditor for other professional institutes or other different organizations. And again, you go in and you see stuff. So it's that idea of show me. So in waste world, the show me is really obvious and really evident. And that, Alistair, is what I think you're finding yourself having to bite your tongue on, because, the show me is ever present. And that's where the storytelling becomes really important, because it's easy to say that's wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, that should be placed there, you've got too much stuff. And it just turns people off. So one of our big challenges, and I mean, it's not just for the waste sector, it's for the whole of the environmental sector, is our stories need to get better. We've seen from the previous couple of years and now going on decades, the facts by themselves are not enough to convey the issue. The facts and the figures and the graphs and the charts and the detail, they don't grab people's attention and their hearts, and they're easy to discount. And much as I never thought I would say, people like Michael Gove, we've had enough of experts. They do capture a particular sentiment from the wider audience, they don't want to be lectured to. They want to understand why they need to do something. Does that mean we need to create not just better stories, but create more time for those conversations to land and to take them one by one? And that was one of the things why I took part in the door-knocking exercises when we were introducing new services, to see firsthand how to get stories across, how to affect change. And it takes time. It takes time. You can do behaviour change really quick. And certainly we saw that in Ireland when they introduced the plastic bag tax, because overnight the amount of plastic bags plummeted. And you saw the same in England when plastic tax came in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really explain the why. Why am I doing this? What's the relevance of doing this? And that issue around appreciation and understanding of the consequences around culture change. And if you look at the various texts and the various literature, culture change is a much longer lasting and a much more involved process, because people have to own it and appreciate it and understanding. So it's about the journey. So you're seeing the younger generation, they have a better appreciation, but there's still the risk of that disconnect between what they know and what they do. And our job is to put down duck boards, or maybe that's not a good analogy nowadays, to make bridges between what they know and what they do.
Yeah, yeah. I commented on something over the holidays there. There was a report in, I think it was England, about too much, basically BBC report, too much incineration, etc., etc. And I put up a bit of a post saying, well, maybe if we did recycle a bit better and we're actually doing, you wouldn't need all these incinerators.
It's a really good...
and that sort of point, we don't seem, as an industry, we don't seem to be getting that sort of basic point out there to the media. Yeah. Almost that thing of, this material's got to go someplace. Go back to, we interviewed Gordon Fergus the last episode, and he started with me at Bar when 95% of the waste was going into landfill, and it was relentless, and you until you've seen that and dealt with that, I don't think you really understand the sort of logistics of waste flow. It's got to go someplace. If it's not going in an incinerator or landfill, it's got to go to a recycling plant or whatever. Yes, ultimately everybody should be reducing, and not producing as much waste, but we're a long, long way away from that.
Unfortunately, you're right. And in that regard, I can see the requirement for such facilities being needed probably for a generation as we move from being a wasteful society to being a wasteless society, as government aims to do by 2040, 2050. But that doesn't take away from the fact we're going to need investment in new facilities to create that bridge, to use the word I used a minute ago, because otherwise we're just going to end up effectively with waste on the streets. And there is this disconnect between people. And you mentioned about that experiential learning. When you run a landfill site taking in almost 500,000 tonne a year, it's fine saying, yes, you're making replacement bags from the curtain siders of lorries. It's fine saying you're recycling X, Y, and Z, but you see just how many glass bottles are coming in from the general waste, or cans or tins or whatever it is. And you're going, but there's people who don't get it, who won't get it, who can't get it due to circumstance at a point in time. And that still has to be dealt with. There is no tap you can turn off. There is no light switch that you suddenly flick. There is a gradual and inexorable change in the waste volumes, which you and I have both seen over the years, in the makeup of waste, the composition of wastes, as new materials are placed on the market. And all this requires time to work its way through. And in the meantime, while that time is happening, waste is being produced today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, next month, every day. In Belfast, I was dealing with 450 tonne a day, every day. And so it's 12, 13 now. So this would be the second ship coming in. We would have a warehouse full of waste, and there'd be at least one loading shovel loading up 40-foot containers, and we'd be getting around 22 containers out a day, unless it was a bad day, in which case it'd be 25. Or a long weekend, in which case it'd be more. So the logistics of moving all these materials into a lorry, making sure all the lorries, when it's cold today, So there's a probable real risk that actually those lorries may not be able to run quite as regularly as possible to get to the facility because of icy roads, because of traffic jams, because of other issues. So what do you do? What's the carrying capacity in the system for this reverse logistics of getting rid of all these materials? This is all completely obscure for people. And I thought the pitch of the BBC article was poor in that it compared managing waste to power production. The issue for the incinerator is not power production. The issue for the waste incinerator, the waste energy from waste plants, is that energy is a byproduct. It's a byproduct of dealing with waste and minimizing the public health and environmental damage that could be created from those materials, and you get a byproduct. If you don't have that facility, where are you going to take these materials?
No, absolutely. Totally agree.
But what I took was quite interesting is, and I don't mean to prolong this necessarily, if you looked at some of the commentary on the BBC website that was underneath the article when it was posted onto not iPlayer, but onto the BBC.
I never actually looked. I never looked at that actually.
There was really good comments along the lines of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Much more, if we recycled so much more, we wouldn't have a requirement for so many facilities. If waste was not so complex, we wouldn't have such a need for such facilities.
Yeah.
If people took greater ownership and responsibility for dealing with the wastes in an appropriate manner, we wouldn't have a need for some of these facilities. And I think there were one or two comments about if we didn't consume quite so much stuff and junk quite so much stuff, we wouldn't have a need. And all those are perfectly legitimate. And it was quite heartening to read that it wasn't just yay, they're right, we shouldn't have all this stuff. It was like, none of us want to have necessarily energy from waste plants all over the countryside, but we're going to need a number for a while until we get to that waste-less society.
I think it's the pace of
once it's done, once we're there, we can take it back.
I think it's the pace of change as well. We keep producing this waste, but the pace of change doesn't keep up. It's like you were saying just earlier about how long it's taking you to get your facility through planning or not, as the case may be. And you think, we still are we're producing waste, producing all this stuff, but, I don't think people really quite appreciate that. Actually, you do have to deal with it. It has to go somewhere, and, it has to go somewhere and it has to go to a facility. And if we haven't got the facilities, it is piling it into a container and shipping it somewhere else where, I can't see it. It's not a problem because it's going somewhere else.
Well, Northern Ireland produces 1 million tonne a year of domestic waste. Rough figures are that municipal waste makes up only about 10 to 12% of the overall wastes generated in Northern Ireland when you include mining wastes and agricultural waste, clinical wastes. So 10 million tonne a year of waste being generated in Northern Ireland. And while Northern Ireland's got quite a good recycling rate of about 50%, it's kind of plateaued over the last 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 years. So that means in the municipal space, there's roughly 500,000 tonnes of waste a year that needs to be disposed of. Now, I wish it was much less. I wish we had greater recycling levels and greater recycling rates. But nevertheless, as an island off an island, we are in a situation where we either have facilities here or we are shipping stuff overseas. And as we get into a greater environmental recognition, there are going to be taxes and charges, and fuel isn't getting any cheaper. There's a whole complexity around this that most people, as we've said once or twice already, it's not within their radar setting because they don't need to think about this stuff.
Yeah, you don't need to know.
And that's what it's like.
Yeah.
There's been some wonderful
Apart from studying for multiple degrees, which I think I'll ask you at the end what your degrees are, because I'm just being nosy. But before we get to that, how do you get away from work? How do you relax? How do you?
I love cinema. I love theatre. That's one thing actually I was really surprised about during COVID was I can't say I go to theatre very often. But what I really missed was the opportunity or the option to go to theatre. And it was really visceral. And I thought, this is weird. This is weird. It's not like I'm champing at the bit to get to a theatre, but I just the chance that I can't get to a theatre is, So cinema, I do a lot of reading. I've currently just put aside a book on how to talk like TED. So that was how to do a TED Talk and how to use images and create stories better and all that kind of stuff, which Santa gave me many years ago and has been on my shelf. So I finally got round to reading that one because the other book I was reading was too heavy. I can only do it in small chunks. It's about Orientalism, about the Middle East rather than the Far East. And it's from Richard Said. Orientalism. It's a really good but really dense book from the late 1980s on how we perceive the Middle East and how we've been allowed to perceive the Middle East through post-colonialism and stuff. Anyway, that got put aside. I'll go back to it. I'm halfway through it by Talk Like TED. And so, as a sort of tiptoe back into it, I'm reading New Scientist at the minute, the Christmas edition of New Scientist, which is fascinating. I've just got to the chapter on climate change. I'm not diving into that.
So there's no kind of murder mysteries there, Tim, in your reading, or your.
Actually, I like murder mysteries on TV. So I'm quite intrigued with Patience. It just started on Channel 4 last night. That's quite interesting. About effectively an autistic lady who's able to see connections in cases that regular police haven't quite seen because they don't have that ability to sort of process that vast data set. But there was another one earlier on last year that I enjoyed with David Mitchell playing his twin brother as a police officer. I was on BBC. So there's many other mystery murders available. I'm looking forward to Slow Horses. Harlem Coben has got a few ones out now on Netflix, which look quite interesting.
I've just seen the latest one he's put out on Netflix, and that is brilliant. Me and my daughter just binge watched the whole thing because you couldn't. Because you couldn't stop. Every time the episode finished, it was like, we need to know what happens next. We need to know what happens next. So yeah, that was definitely a binge watch. So what's the latest thing you've watched on the cinema then?
The latest thing was Conclave.
Okay.
Conclave, which was about Ray Fiennes playing this character who's the Dean of Rome, and the Pope dies.
Yes, it was that.
And his job is to oversee the transition of power from one Pope to the election of the new Pope.
That was a book as well,
and it's really good. It's really clever.
It was a book, I think, as well. I think I've read the book.
Yeah. It's a book as well.
Yeah.
And I took my daughter, who's 13, to that, and I kind of expected her to go, "Oh, Dad, this is really boring. Look, it's really slow. It's all religious and stuff." But she came out going, "That was really thought-provoking. That was really, really engaging." And there weren't murders, there weren't, intrigue and stuff like that. But nevertheless, the politics behind it and the positioning and the photography is superb. The casting is great. It was a great movie. It's one of those movies you kind of go, this is a really grown-up movie. It's not like I am looking forward to the next Ethan Hunt. So the next Mission Impossible, which is due out this year.
Yeah.
So an eclectic mix is how I take my downtime and getting out in the open. I love being in nature. I love being part of nature. That can be mountain walks. That can be just even a walk on the roadside. And as I'm sitting here, I'm watching a large wood pigeon just perching on a branch. So the starlings have passed a few minutes ago. And that's one of the things I find really amazing. Nowadays, many folk are better able to distinguish different car brands than they are tree types or birds. That shows a certain degree of disconnection from the system that's keeping us all alive.
Yeah.
I heard a rumour. Sorry, Jane. I heard a rumour, Tim. There's unrest in Newcastle about the the chairlift or gondola scheme up the Mourne Mountains. Is that correct?
I think that chairlift scheme has been underway for
years.
Some time. I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, because certainly our economics here are pretty strained, and I can't see such projects having a go ahead. But they were quite common in the past. I mean, there used to be a gondola from Bray up to Bray Head in the Victorian era to allow for those less able, less willing to walk to get from the seaside up to the mountaintop to be able to look across the Irish Sea. So they were quite common, but they've obviously fallen out of fashion in the same way as trams did, and are now being sort of potentially reinvestigated where possible.
I'm going to bring you back to your back to waste again. You know, we've done all the nice. I'd love to do this.
We did divert slightly.
I'd love to do all this, but what about your current role? What's and I'm going to do the two here. What about we first started about CIWM and also ARC21. So what do you see by the time you finish your presidency of CIWM? What are you trying to achieve? What's your sort of role?
It goes back to a kind of a question I think I posed at CIWM annual meeting in London when I got the chance to kind of have that Homer moment to go, is waste a failure of design? And so my presidential report has been all about picking up on that issue, about if we were able to manage the design process better, how would we do that? And could we minimize the amount of materials flowing through the system to come to us? Because it does seem kind of perverse that we keep getting these targets, and they're rather arbitrary targets, to do things like 50% recycling, 60% recycling, etc., when we do nothing to mitigate or turn off the amount of materials that are flowing through the system. And surely if we're trying to recycle more, what we should be looking to do is, A, not have as much stuff in the first place, and B, make that stuff that does flow through the system have a greater value. So it isn't quite so complex. And I know in America at the minute, there's huge debate. And in fact, the state of California is taking the plastics industry, and by default, the petrochemical industry, to court, because it believes that effectively the large producers have channel shifted responsibility from themselves to us as householders. I don't want to use the word consumers, because it's a word that in the last year or two I've had again that Homer moment going, I don't want to be defined as a consumer. So to householders, residents, and citizens. And citizens now are responsible for recycling. Surely now, knowing all the facts and figures in the system, those who are producing those materials should have a better sense of how to maintain the integrity or maintain the value of those materials, rather than gifting them all to us and then expecting us to represent them. That's a huge burden to place onto citizens. Now, I know big industry has been very effective in terms of engaging with governments to ensure that this system is the current system in place. But ultimately, going back to what I said earlier on, everything must change for everything to stay the same. So presidentially, that issue of design, I realized I was probably naive during the course of the presidential study in my initial belief that it was just down to designers. So in that space, how do we create better materials from the get-go that we can then use, and that we can then re-gift back through a new supply chain for reuse purposes?
And your answer to that is?
It's a work in progress.
Yes, I think that's going to take more than a year to address all of that.
Yes, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, but yeah, fair point. So what about your ARC21 role? What's your, what are you trying to achieve from that? Where do you see yourself taking that?
Well, the big thing for ARC21 is to make sure we have effective contracts in place, and with a small team that putting those contracts on the books to allow for the waste those councils are giving us to be correctly disposed of or correctly recycled. So there's been a lot of work done by the team last year to put in place contracts worth, I don't know, between 120, 150 million pounds for residual waste as a short-term stopgap while we await the bigger decision. The issue does appear to be this kind of can kicking, though. A bit like many of the big decisions in many of the different environmental media, it's very easy for decisions to be deferred.
Yeah.
Because they're not easy decisions. They're complex. They're not popular decisions. So if they can be just left for a while, maybe they'll work their way out. This stage, our planning permission has been effectively on the books since 2014. And again, while there are delays and while there are shifts in government policy and all the rest, there's still a necessity for facilities. There's still a need for facilities. They'll still make a useful contribution to the landscape of Northern Ireland PLC, improve its resilience, reduce its reputational risk in case waste ends up where it shouldn't end up. And ultimately, as I have said a number of times to a number of different actors, and indeed on this podcast, once we have built the facility and used the facility, if it is no longer needed, if it runs to term and has done its job, we can take it down and reuse the space for something else.
Yeah.
Because we've done that before with all sorts of other industries. Look at flax, rope building, cigarette manufacture in Northern Ireland, gun manufacture. After all, Northern Ireland made huge numbers of parachutes and artillery in World War II, which is now largely forgot and overlooked. Or shirts. Marks and Spencer's supply chain for shirts, most of them came from Northern Ireland back in the day. So industry is not fixed. It's not fixed in stone or things move on. But we have this very short-term memory that things that we build will exist in perpetuity. But we know that's not true, ultimately.
Yes, you see all the incinerators that were built in the 80s. They were all taken down, and now they're all, houses or whatever. So in terms of any fact you want to share about your job or sector, I think the fact of how many containers were filled and sent every day across the seas was quite an interesting one. But is there anything else you think people, might like to know?
Well, the one I like that springs to mind when you ask me that question is that, ARC21 manages 15 million black bins worth of waste a year.
Wow.
Which is far, far larger than the Stormont building in the Castlereagh Hills. Far larger. I think it's 3 times as large and about as wide.
Okay, that's a lot of bins. That's a lot of bins.
That's a lot of bins to empty.
That's a lot of bins.
A lot of bins to empty. So we always asked all our guests for a piece of their favourite slang or dialect, and I'm sure there must be some Irish or Northern Irish ones in here someplace.
Well, the phrases I revert to, and I use them quite frequently when I'm speaking to different audiences, because it engages straight away, is I talk about lar and pruck and cowping and sprattling around and things like that. And these are great Ulster Scots words that don't really get much airplay. So taking them kind of in order. Glar is generally something of very little value. It's generally kind of wet. It's kind of what you would consider to be residual waste and possibly mixed in with a good bit of leachate. So it's kind of icky stuff.
Would that be similar to, I remember the landfill, the guys would talk about the glower in sense of just the muck in the road. That
could well be part of it. It's that kind of just...
yeah.
So I use it in the context of it's what's left over. Once you've done all the recycling, once you've taken everything out, you're left over with this wet, and because we're on these Western Isles, they invariably have a little bit of rain involved, but this wet material. So the glar, what do you do with that?
Not heard that one before.
And the pruck is stuff.
The pruck's a scrap. That's the good stuff.
Yeah, it's there's variations on its interpretation, but there's also variations in terms of its pronunciation. But pruck is stuff, so you want to recycle as much pruck as possible. And then coping is to fall over. So, we've all these targets to meet, but every once in a while we cope, we miss them. We don't make it. So how do we minimize our coping? And sprattling around is kind of bumbling around. Clambering in an ungainly manner, I think, is the phrase I heard being described as. So how do we clamber in an ungainly manner to improve our performance around waste and to move more materials out of being a waste to being a resource to contribute beneficially to the circular economy and the development of the circular economy? It will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And as a sector, one of the big challenges for us is how do we bring the whole sector with us? Because if we jump too far ahead and we just talk about circularity, we will not bring those who are running the landfill sites or running the waste disposal facilities or collecting the bins with us. But yet, just like that discussion about ferries, they are an integral and an essential part of the process. And they need to appreciate, they need to feel part of this process of change.
I think that there's a very real issue there, Tim, isn't there? And there's probably one CIWM's grappling with at the moment, because we've got the operation, what I would call the operational waste managers that see the day-to-day reality, and then we've got the new organisations coming on board, the circular economy and so on, who are in a way doing the theoretical stuff, and both camps think the others don't understand each other.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a bit of common ground between them to say,
You're right, and that's that bridge thing. That's that having that how to create that bridge, and not allowing the either to exist solely in a silo or in isolation, because that will cause a fracture across the institution. And the reality is that there are many people, there are many members and fellows who have experience of both camps.
Yeah.
So how do you energize? How do you activate them to use their agency to create that bridge between the two elements? I have come across many in the circular economy camp who will turn their back on the waste side and just go, well, in a circular economy world, we don't have waste.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, but we're not there. We don't live in that world. We may want to get there, but we live in this world. And this world is very different, because have you been out on the road recently? Have you seen what's in the bins? Because while we appreciate we want to get there, we are here. And I know in speaking to many of my former colleagues on refuse collection or on street cleansing, they will view exactly as you said, all this talk about circularity as so much hot air that they go, I'm still up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be on the road by 6 to empty bins and to do it today, tomorrow, the next day. And all your discussion about circularity has no bearing on my job or what I see in my operations. So there is an issue about how does what you're doing contribute, but also if you want to proceed and to work through the system, what opportunities have you got to progress? What training do you need? What training do you want? What training would you like to move you away from the front line to be a different role, so you can take what you've learned and apply it elsewhere through the waste and resources sector?
Absolutely. So, final question for me. I'm going to give you a magic wand to resolve something in the waste industry. What would you like to use it for?
Well, I guess I've probably touched upon it earlier on.
I was going to say you might have touched it. I think I know what you're going to say here, but I'll let you answer.
I think that every product placed on the marketplace should have an inherent EPR, extended producer responsibility, built into it from the get-go, so that everything that is placed on the market is the responsibility for financing to that organization that places it on the market. I think that would transform what was placed, the volume of what was placed, the complexity of what was placed in very short order as the difficulties became apparent. And I think the expectation that it falls to the public purse should have to be clearly stated and clearly endorsed or accepted by the regulator before any material is placed on the market. And I'm thinking of certain products like vapes, for example. They emerged in a firestorm of interest and it exploded in popularity with no consideration for where these things end up or how you deal with them. And they've caused, significant problems throughout the supply chain in terms of fires. I mean, we've gone from having occasional site fires to having daily or weekly site fires arising from battery explosions, from the profusion of batteries in the system. So I think that is a real clear example where any material placed in the market should have an inherent extended producer responsibility right from the get-go. So if you're some of those big fast fashion firms who are now moving into the UK, if you're placing 100,000 new items on the market a day, you should pay for their recovery, because the reality is they're so mass-produced. Never mind the exploitation that goes into their manufacture from the outset. They're so mass-produced, largely from oil-based product. They have no value for recycling, and in fact, they're contaminating the recycling of textiles.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I like that
one. No, I like that
we'll
one.
Go for
That's
that one.
good.
And the last
good.
question, Tim. You actually said earlier as well about the fact that the waste industry is so diverse and there's so much involved in the waste industry. So, we want the younger generation, next generation coming forward to, to take on from when we decide to hang up our boots and, So what advice would you give the younger generation coming into the sector?
Well, I would say this is a great sector to work in because you can make a real difference. There's real scope to engage on multiple fronts, be it from the manual, the physical, the vocational, be it from the high learning, the academic, be it from the legal, be it from the social, the marketing. There's almost any aspect of the sector that's open to you if you're interested. So it's a really engaging sector. And you can move across the sectors or you move across the themes or the disciplines once you're in the sector as well. And it's expanding. Its importance as a contributor and measurement metric of the climate change agenda. It's only going to grow in importance. So in the same way as 10, 15 years down the road, no person will have a job that is not affected by climate breakdown, climate chaos, climate change. The circular economy has a really big role to play in able to demonstrate, in able to contribute, and able to offset some of those impacts. So this is going to be a really exciting area to be involved in. And it's like a Wombles 2.0. Some of the readers may need to look up the Wombles, but the Wombles 2.0, are you going to be a data analyst? Are you going to be a behavioral economist? Are you going to be a circular economist? Are you going to be, a sheet welder? What are you going to do in this sector? Because they're all needed. And we're going from a space where at the minute there's 150,000 of us working in this sector. By the year 2030, 80% of us are still going to be in employment, but there's going to be a need for something close to 500,000 of us. So it's a vast growth area, and data, AI, robotics are massive. They're going to play such a key role in the future in managing these materials. So it's a real big growth area, and 17 billion a year that we're currently generating is going to also substantially grow as the issue around things like critical raw materials becomes more appreciated, managing supply chains become more appreciated. So it's in some regards, I don't say this lightly, in some regards, it'd be very exciting to be starting over again. So for anybody who's listening who wants to get involved in this sector, what I would say is get your experience, take it from wherever you can get it, from working in a charity shop, from volunteering with your local cleanup park, from working on the council over the summer. Get your experience, see if you like it, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, good advice.
That sounds like good advice, Tim. So before we finish, I did say that was my last question. What degrees have you got? How many and what are they in?
I have 2 environmental science degrees. I've got 2 business management degrees, and I've got a doctorate.
Oh,
well done. Very impressive. Do you not use your doctorate? Do you not use your doctorate?
Dr. Tim?
Well, it was in local government change management.
Right.
So maybe I am using it, perhaps,
But you not use the doctor? Are you not allowed to use doctor? And you're
Oh, you mean title
the
doctor?
title, yeah.
Well, I don't want to create a barrier. I don't want to create a perception of some mystique or aura. So it's just something related as a purely personal torture. So the thing for me was, as I mentioned earlier on, I did my studies while I was working, apart from my first degree.
Yep.
So the idea was to apply what I'm learning to what I'm doing.
Studies. Yeah.
And I think it's what's called a practitioner researcher.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good.
Well, I'm
Very
feeling
good.
I'm not. We're not worthy.
We're feeling
Yeah,
a bit poorly here, Jane, aren't we?
To get some more degrees going on here, Alistair.
You've trumped us totally.
Absolutely.
So that is us. That is us done. Tim, thank you ever so much for your
Yes,
time.
thank you.
That was fascinating. I really enjoyed that. So
Good. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I would like to do it again at some stage if you're interested.
Good.
no problem.